now 2 weeks since the South Downs Way 50. I've really been enjoying my break. I had a week off, just no running, just eating chocolate, pizzas, just everything I was craving. And then the last week I've been in Northwest Wales on holiday with my family, and we've been doing like long hikes and some like mountain climbing, and also I've been doing some like beautiful trail runs along the coast. Just super picturesque. So yeah, nice and refreshed now. I'm ready to get back into training. But I just kind of wanted to do a quick video to talk about kind of my feelings on the race and get into a bit more of the detail around how I approached it and things that I would potentially do better next time. In general, I am super happy with how this race went. I ran it in 8 hours 44 minutes, which is on the fast end of what I was aiming for. I really thought it was going to be something like 9.5 hours, but yeah, it was just like perfect weather. My body at the end I was still moving fast, so yeah, everything just kind of fell into place on the day. It was great. So the morning of the race, like, registration was super quick. We got there about half an hour, 45 minutes before the start. I walked in to get registered and it literally took like 5 minutes. Got my tracker. The tracker was amazing. My parents could see exactly where I were along the route, and it made it much easier for them to find me, find places to see me along the way. The organisation of the race was amazing. The aid stations had everything you could possibly want. Everything was super clear. All the information on the website was great. So yeah, organisation of this race was very good. And it was very clear when we arrived that it was just going to be like a perfect day. I was a bit worried it was going to be a bit cold at the beginning, but actually it was like blue skies, sun was super hot, so it kind of mitigated the fact that it was like 3-4 degrees when we started. The course was absolutely beautiful. You've seen the race video, you'll see it's like views out to the sea on one side and views into like English country fields on the other side, and you're just running along a ridge going up and down the hills. So yeah, I mean, the course was absolutely stunning. With my gear, my approach to the gear was to go super lightweight. For like clothes, I wore shorts and t-shirt, and then at the beginning when it was a bit cold, I used the mandatory gear, the gloves, the buff, and my waterproof jacket to keep me warm, and took those off as soon as I warmed up. And whilst it got a bit chilly towards the end when the wind picked up, at no point did I put any of those layers back on once I took them off. So it just meant that I wasn't carrying like extra layer, and I was really happy that I didn't carry any extra stuff. So in terms of pacing, I definitely went out harder than expected. I realised pretty much from the start that my heart rate was way higher than I would expect it to be at that pace. And after about 10k, I kind of just thought, okay, if it settles down, I'll start pacing based on heart rate. But it didn't particularly. It kind of stayed in the 160s, 170s, which is way higher than I was expecting. I was aiming for like a 150, 155 heart rate throughout the race. And I thought there might be a risk that when I get to the end, I would bonk because I was pushing myself too hard. But for some reason, I just kept going. But it does mean that I probably ran this race harder than I planned, at least, because I was just aiming to finish it, and probably ran it near enough as hard as I could have potentially ran it. A big part of this course is definitely the hills. There's like 8 pretty significant hills, and they're definitely longer than I'm used to. Like in London, we don't have hills that go on for like 4 kilometers at a fairly steep grade for a long period. So you're running for like 20-30 minutes uphill pretty consistently. Most of the first half I walked the hills, so I would walk until my heart rate dropped, and then I would run a bit, but towards the end it was very much just walking. My approach to the aid stations in this race was just to get in and out, grab water and go. I did not spend much time at all. The only thing I took from the aid stations, apart from maybe a couple of cookies, was water, and in the second to last aid station I just took some Tailwind instead of water, just because I was running low on gels. And because of that, over the 8 hours and 44 minutes, I was only stationary for 3 minutes. Ran for about 6 hours, walked for about 2 hours, and most of that was uphill. And then I was only stationary for 3 minutes over the whole period. And that's just because I went into those aid stations, grabbed what I needed and went. Every single aid station afterwards has a big hill, so I just was like, okay, I can get myself sorted whilst I'm walking up that hill. And I think that worked quite well for me. In terms of nutrition, I started with 3 scoops of Tailwind in both of my bottles. Only one of them I started with water just to keep the weight down. I knew that I could probably manage that one bottle to the first aid station that was 18k, and then at that aid station I only filled up one of my bottles again just because I knew the next aid station was quite close. The second, third and fourth aid stations I filled up both water bottles because I know there was a bigger gap after them, and then the second to last aid station I took some tailwind instead of water because I was running low on my gels. I only took 6 gels with me, but actually I think that worked quite well. Probably if I'd have taken an extra one I wouldn't have needed that tailwind, but yeah, I was quite happy with that. And then at the last aid station I didn't actually stop, I just went straight through. One of the things that I was a bit nervous about before this race was cows on the route. I've had some pretty bad experiences going through fields where large groups of cows have got a bit over interested and charged over, so I'm a bit nervous around cows, but luckily the fields that we went through, the cows were pretty sedated. They just kind of ignored you, which I was very, very happy about. There was kind of 2 things I was a bit nervous about on this run. One was the physical challenge, but then there was also the mental challenge. I never run with music. I typically just go out and run, and I never really get bored, and I've never had that issue. But this was the longest I've ever run. I was going to be running for about 9 hours. I didn't struggle at all with it from a mental perspective. I quite enjoyed myself. I was having fun. I got to the end and I was just like, yeah. At no point did I ever consider quitting or stopping. I was pretty convinced that, even if I got injured, I would walk to the end once I'd banked enough time. So yeah, from a mental perspective, I didn't really struggle at all. But from a physical perspective, my legs definitely were taking a bit of a beating. So 20k in, I started to feel soreness. 30k in, they started to get tired. 50k in, I felt my first twinges of cramp, but 60k in I had I stubbed my toe, nearly fell over, and I suddenly had cramp in both of my legs, so that was a bit painful, but it basically meant for the last 20k I was running with on and off cramp. I was using salt tablets, and I've never really had them work as effectively as they did, but on the race, anytime I felt some cramp, I took a salt tablet, and within a minute or so, I was starting to feel the cramp dissipate, and I went through, 6 or 7 salt tabs, and they were definitely helping. I've never experienced it in a race where salt tablets have been so effective. And I used them all up until 5k remaining when I ran out of salt tablets, and then in the last 5k I had 2 or 3 moments where I had to stop and stretch out, but I think if I'd have had a couple of extra salt tablets that wouldn't have been an issue. So yeah, I was really happy with how that worked out. Definitely going to take them next time, especially if it's a hot race. And because of that cramping, the hills at the end kind of had a slightly different experience for me. Usually it's oh no, the hills, but actually the hills were an opportunity to walk. I had a chance to stop, slow down, and my legs were recovering on the uphills, and then on the flats and downhills towards the end is where I was struggling because I was running, and that's when I was getting the cramp. Yeah, that was interesting. I kind of have a feeling that if I was to do a longer ultramarathon 100 miles and it was super flat, I feel like I need to run the whole thing, and I think that would be seriously challenging when you've got cramp. But on those hills, I met loads of lovely people. I found with this race, there was about 6 or 7 people that I kept on running with. We were all overtaking each other, we'd run for a bit together. But yeah, I met loads of nice people and just had long conversations. We'd get to a hill and we'd just walk up the hill together, having a proper chat, a proper natter. Good to take your mind off some of the pain. But yeah, that's definitely a dynamic that you don't get in a city marathon where everyone's racing for PBs. So in terms of my recovery, straight after the race my legs were wrecked, and the first 3 days I was having to walk downstairs backwards because my thighs were too weak to lower me down the stairs. But after 5 days, pretty much all of the pain had gone away and I was walking normally, and then 7 days after the race I got back into running, so it took it super easy, but yeah, it took a week to recover from the race, which yeah, pretty happy with. There was no permanent injuries. Actually I think probably had more strains and pains during the training than I did actually as a result of the race, so yeah, super happy with that. In terms of my training next time, I think I probably pushed myself quite hard on the amount of volume I was doing. So I did 10 weeks at more than 100k volume, but I did push it to about 130k, and I think maybe it was slightly too much volume, especially when I started shifting towards the longer runs, and as a result my body wasn't recovering from the long runs as much as it would if I dropped the volume of my weekly runs. So I think that's next time when I start to add in the longer runs, I'm gonna reduce the amount I'm running in the week so that my body has more time to recover. I had a couple of weeks in my last training block where I had to take some time off because my muscles were too tight and it was causing pain, slight issues. So yeah, I think reducing the volume slightly as I start building up the long runs will help. One thing that I'm trying to figure out is I didn't do much hill training for this race because when I was planning on adding it in is when I got the slight injuries, the slight niggles. But I actually found in the race that I don't think it massively impacted me. I was expecting it to really, really be an issue, and I don't think it necessarily was. But I think maybe my legs would be a bit stronger and I wouldn't have as much cramp. So I definitely want to build in some more hill work into my runs, but I don't think I'm going to do what I did previously where I would aim for every single run being like super hilly. A few hilly runs a week would be better than doing every single run with hills and with high elevation in it. The other big thing that I added into this training block was math. And I wasn't just doing pure math base building. I basically shifted so that all of my easy runs were at a math heart rate. The pace of my easy runs dropped significantly, and I think that made a big deal in terms of my recovery. I don't think I would have been able to do 130k weeks with speed work and big long runs if I didn't reduce the speed of my easy runs. So planning on continuing with that approach. And finally, I mentioned previously that I'd done a little fundraiser, managed to raise £1,500, which I'm super happy with, way more than I expected. So yeah, pretty happy with that. But yeah, it was a perfect day. Weather amazing, went out hard and somehow managed to maintain it, ran it way faster than I expected. Yeah, like it was great. I couldn't really have asked for a better day. A few things to learn for next time, but yeah, I'm very, very happy. All right, cool. Cheers. Well, thanks for watching.